Welcome to another episode of Future Institute's Future Talks segment. Future Talks is a monthly podcast organized and hosted by Future Institute, a nonprofit organization committed to growing student success and building a better society. Each month, you'll hear from one of our stakeholders. I am your host, Nichole Pientka, Program Officer for Future Institute's Future Leaders Initiative, or FLY program. Today, our guest is Kandann Coleman, Associate Regional Director of State Government Affairs at Everytown for Gun Safety. Kandann is also a graduate from Horizon Science Academy Toledo, which is one of the 12 high schools Future Institute's program support. Kandann, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hey, Nichole, and thanks for having me. My name is Kandann Coleman. I am from Toledo, Ohio, born and raised, but I live now here in Washington, D.C., which I love. I said I was going to be here for 2 years, but it looks like I'll be here for a few more. But I really kind of am here for the work that I do, which is I am a gun safety lobbyist for proactive gun reform in policy. And I do that specifically in my 4 states that I run in the southern region, which keeps me traveling, but it's really fun. And it's exactly, I think, funny enough, what I thought I'd be doing when I was graduating from Horizon Science Academy Toledo. And even prior to Horizon Toledo, I also went to Horizon Science Academy Springfield. So I had been a part of the family since I think 5th, 6th grade, which kind of instilled some values in me and kind of carried me through until college. So recently, I've been doing some educational things. I am still in a program at Ohio University for my master's, which is in diplomacy and foreign affairs under social sciences. I am so interested in kind of getting involved in that international stage, which I think is fitting right with the climate of right now, kind of talking about Ukraine and different diplomatic affairs. But in addition to that, in my primary bucket of work, I am lobbying for gun reform on the state level with state legislators, with governors across the country. And it's really fun. It's not at all what I thought I'd be doing. I knew about lobbying, never thought I'd actually be a lobbyist, but I really do enjoy the work. And so really this is from my love of advocacy, which I found really young, honestly. I found it when I was in, 5th and 6th grade with my dad, doing door-to-door kind of political work with his labor union. He's a construction worker, and my mom is in auto work. So we're really strong with our union values, but growing up, just realizing that there's inequality out there in the world, right? Like my mom was a single mom and there was a lot that we went without. And so it really kind of shapes you when you see the mayor of the city live a block apart from you and their kids don't go to your school with you because they go to private school and you go to public. And realizing that you shop at the same Walmart or the same grocery store, but their house looks noticeably different and their roads look different. And because of a street, you separate 2 experiences. And it's funny because I engaged with the mayor through my dad's capacity at work. So as a child, I had access to these individuals and this lifestyle, but I would go home with my mom to a completely different perspective. And so growing up, I was questioning really hard things. And I got to, middle school and high school and really took ownership of my educational journey. I graduated in 3 years, thanks to my guidance counselor at Horizon. And then I went off to college and I've done really great things since then, but I'm happy to talk with you today because I haven't done a lot of reflecting of some of these things or saying it out loud, who's to credit for some of the success and, what are the lessons learned along the way. So yeah, that's a little bit of who I am.
It's so interesting to hear your background because I know I've had you on the career panel a couple months ago, and everything you had to say about your career and even stuff you mentioned now, I was really interested on how you kind of got to that point, and a lot of who we are, I think, in our stories are so ingrained on how we grew up and who our parents were and how our parents raised us. So it's really interesting to hear you're a little bit more about your story, and it's super interesting. And I think that kind of leads me into if you could just talk a little bit about your transition from high school into college? I know you said you graduated from high school in 3 years, and so um, what being kind of a young college student, especially like a year younger than everyone else, how do you feel like that impacted you? And in addition to that, what do you feel like, some challenges you faced as just like a normal college student, but also as kind of like that early high school grad?
Yeah, I remember being so headstrong, right? At this time in my life, I'm like ready to get out of my parents' house, take life by the reins. My mom had taken me and two of my best friends, who are still my best friends from high school. She had taken us to Washington, D.C. to tour some schools. And we went to Howard University, which is a historically Black college and university. And I remember wanting to go so bad, but being so scared because it's in the middle of like, downtown DC. I'm from Toledo, Ohio. Like, I mean, we're the inner city, but we're not the city, like not in the way a New York is, right? So we opted with my dad to go to Bowling Green State University, which I'm wearing my Black Alumni Council shirt today. And I love Bowling Green, right? Obviously. But Bowling Green was not Howard. And so for me, I think, my educational journey turned out the way it was supposed to be. I am grateful for it. I'm grateful for the network I've got, the friends, the community, the people who still even I am connecting with in DC who are, connected to the alma mater. I mean, it's just the network was amazing and the time spent was amazing. But for me, when you like you mentioned, in 3 years, I'm so successful, right? I'm valedictorian. I was the president of National Honor Society. I like ran all these clubs and organizations because we had so much at our high school. I'm playing two sports. We're competing in national tournaments. Like it was really exciting. And I got to college and I realized that I was underachieving and I was dealing with grade failure for the first time ever, which was hard. And it like was smacking me this imposter syndrome of like, yeah, you're really not cut out to be here because you can't even get a B in a class, right? Like I'm straight A student. I'm a 4.2 something because I was an honor student leaving high school and I get to college and I'm barely performing, right? And it was a really kind of check yourself moment, but I've really adopted those kinds of moments in my life as guiding points. But when you're in that moment, it doesn't feel so good. So it doesn't matter what the future is going to teach you. In the moment, it still really feels awful. And so that's what I faced. I called my dad one year. I remember, I think it was like my sophomore, junior year, and all my friends, it felt like we graduated together. All of us, I think a group of 6 went to Bowling Green together. By the end of the first year, 4 of us were still friends. And it felt like everyone was quitting college, like their freshman year, they were going home. My best friends, who I had done this with the whole time, I call my dad and I go, Dad, I think I want to transfer to Toledo, right? 30 minutes away is Bowling Green. 10 minutes away is the University of Toledo from my dad's house. And I'm like, Dad, I just want to be close to you guys because I felt really disconnected from my family. Like independently, my political views were changing, all these views on life were developing, and I was becoming a completely different person that I did not think my family like recognized, and I didn't think they'd like me anymore. So I was like dealing with a whole lot, and I was shutting down, and it was just a rough time. And so I think like in those moments, I just like realized like you're either gonna make it or break it right now, and so often I poured myself into student clubs and organizations again. I became super social. I pledged a sorority. I mean, I really just kind of listened to my dad on the phone say, don't come home. Like, we don't want to see you. Like, and he like he's a tough love kind of guy, but he's like, honey, like, we love you, but like, you didn't choose Toledo for a reason, right? So do whatever you can there. And I really made Bowling Green my community. So I think you have to realize that you're going to go through a wall, but on the other side of that wall is really some growth that can like redefine who you are.
Wow, that really, honestly, your experience is so interesting. And I honestly think that a lot of the students, like you, going through, our schools, any one of the 12 concept high schools are going to feel very similarly to what you experienced. and I try, our programs at Future Institute are built to hopefully at least lessen that culture shock, that reality flip of college, that reality check that you kind of had, right? And it's something that sometimes you just kind of have to experience to really understand it. And your experience is just so, you know, like it sounds so like visceral, but it also sounds like you really, bounced back. You were able to kind of go back to your roots of that social, person that you always have been, and kind of climb out of that, you know, that kind of pivotal moment. So that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate that. I appreciate your candidness. Um, and so like I really want to ask you a little bit more. I know you talked a little bit about being a lobbyist and kind of always knowing you wanted to go into politics, but any more you want to reflect on kind of your career path and kind of how you came to be in your position now, um, and just yeah, just how you came to your position now. And I think you said something about um, kind of creating your own major in college as well. Anything you can reflect on with that?
Yeah, no, thank you for even, the recognition of transparency. I just think I learned a lot of lessons the hard way. And I think that these are systemic issues that a lot of us deal with and we just don't talk about, or there's not anywhere we can point to say, hey, oh, that validates my experience. And so you feel a little bit of like, that questioning and that internal fight. But yeah, no, I stumbled upon lobbying just through my love of advocacy, right? Like I'd grown up in this community of using my voice to protest with my dad. We were boycotting things. He was always on the picket line, right? Working in construction and fighting with the GM workers and different things. And so I grew up in this really politically engaged family. And so I just always knew I wanted to use my voice, but how do I get paid to do it? Because listen, my dad would make fun of me. And especially I think when you're, a lot of immigrant kids feel this, but also a lot of first generation kids feel this. I mean, a lot of minority kids, we just automatically get the understanding of like, we're in school because we're the ones who can do it. We can make the difference. We can be the change, right? And so I grew up with this like know-it-all, like, I'm either going to be a doctor, a lawyer, I'm going to be one of the dominant industries that can make money because this investment has to be for something. And my dad just kind of listened to me. He backed off of me. Like he really pushed me into union law. And I could not fall in love with law. I just couldn't do it. And I know a lot of people want to be lawyers. Good for them. We need them. Fabulous to, have so many, but not me. And so again, how do I make money? And I interned, I went to the House in Ohio, served the minority leader of the Ohio House. But that deep love and kind of rootedness in Ohio, kind of opportunities really came from me creating my own major in undergrad. They like empowered me to just like do what I wanted. They were like, listen, we're a liberal arts college, like figure out what you like and make a career out of it. And so I found the degree program at Ohio State University. And the program basically outlined 7 or 8 courses, and then of course like your electives. And I take it to my advisor and I say, hey, do we have things that can kind of suffice and fit this? Like, what can we make this into? And they came back and said, yeah, we've got actually like 95% of this, and we can get you in an independent study, which will cover this course, and how they can kind of make things happen. And I was able to, yeah. So I was happy. But that empowered me to kind of like make my career what I wanted it to be too, right? Like I could find and make. And so all of my experiences so far have really made me into what I say a junior diplomat. In the fact that I don't know if I want to take the Foreign Services Officers test yet, but I know I want to do some sort of diplomacy work. I'd love to be a US ambassador. I've always kind of stayed connected to the United Nations, especially from my undergrad programs. So that's kind of where my heart is like women and children advocacy on an international level, but I'll settle for national for now.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, you have a lot of years ahead in, I mean,
Yeah.
I do too. I mean, it's
Right.
we're young. We have so much ahead of us, and just getting the experience that you're getting in your current position, and the, the leadership that role that you have there, as well as your all your connections and stuff, are gonna really help you go, far. And I think that's awesome. And I love what you said about trying to make money with your
Yes.
voice. And I was like, wow, I really connected to that because
I'm
it's
loud.
really I really think it's difficult for most people to find a career that they love, or I guess make money doing what they love. I guess that's a
Mhm.
better way to put it. And it's amazing that you're able to do that.
This is absolutely the life I wanted to live and who I wanted to be. And for me to be able to see, like with something like this, right, I'm like talking to, in a lot of ways, my high school self in some of these answers, but like in the way that I'm able to kind of have this full circle moment, it's just really special because you just sometimes you don't stop enough and think. I mean, I'm young and it's just so much of an uphill journey, right? To feel like I made it and to feel like, okay, I'm successful. Like right now, I'm debating, do I want an MBA, right? Like I just finished a master's degree. Do I want to go get an MBA? Like what? Like why can't I just be satisfied? So it's this kind of like interesting space to be, but it's also incredibly fun. And like I'm really trying to show off my wins on my LinkedIn because I'm having a lot of fun and I want to be able to like show that professionally. But yeah, I mean, there's something really nice about being able to just like reflect and honestly say, like, these are the things that I am doing, and to give yourself, like, your flowers.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, like, I'm really hoping that our students listen to this podcast because I really think that they'll connect with your story a
Yeah.
lot, and your experience, and just seeing like where you're at today. Like, I mean, like that part of that is you, like who you are, but it's also that like you come from similar background to them,
Mhm.
and them seeing that you as a role model is just, it's powerful, and it
Yeah.
can be really powerful. And that's what I want for my students too, is I want to give them role models, mentors, people to just look up to and say, hey, like I can be like Kandann, I can be like her.
And to put a
um,
name on it, right? Like that's really special. Yeah.
Definitely. um, so kind of along those lines too, what do you think is the most important thing that you learned between going to college and transitioning into your career? And do you think that kind of college students today are going through something similar, even, I guess, reflecting on with COVID and everything as well? That's a huge just interrupter to a lot of things too.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I've been like sitting with lately is that I've had to lean on my community to get the opportunities that like I've gotten and that feel good to me, right? Like my community has provided these to me in three different ways, I'll say. My friends, right? Like my friends speak my name when I'm not in certain rooms, but that's because I've put effort into who are my friends, right? What values do they reflect? Like these people are incredible, right? I have great community in DC. And so that's turning into opportunities for me because when they're not able to like kind of advocate for themselves, they're like, oh, I have someone for this. And it's just so good for me. But two, it's like my community gave me this career. I just leaned into what like I had always been around and what I've always known. And that's like advocacy, community organizing, like leadership, like let's be the change and like follow this call to action. That's I've heard since I was 7, right, with my dad again. But also the fact that my family has allowed me to take these opportunities. my mama, and this is not everyone, but my mom like drives from Ohio to DC to help move me anytime. She's done it all over Ohio, but every single time I've ever needed to move, my mom and my stepdad will haul these trucks and like move me wherever. I mean, and they drove the 8-hour drive to DC to move me down here. And like, if I were to call her today and say, Mom, like, come get me, I'm ready to come home to Ohio, they'd come down to DC and pull me right back up to Ohio. So the support that I've always had, I sometimes have to move in 2 weeks to take a campaign opportunity or to do different things. I don't do that anymore, but when I was early in my career, in order to be competitive, I had to do these really fast turnaround things. And it was only because of my family that I could afford that, because I was not making insane money. Okay, I couldn't afford $1,000 moving company. And so it's like having that kind of network has always been the key to like my success. So I'm just trying to credit everyone along the way, but yeah, like leaning into your community to get the opportunities that you really want, like it's just, they're all there. So I think understanding that and really valuing the people around you is so important. And it really does a lot, because while you're growing and getting higher in life and in status and all these different things, like you really want to have good people around you that you can trust, that you love, that have seen your growth. I mean, it just feels so much better. So yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that story about your mom coming to help move
She's
you.
crazy, like just so cool.
That's awesome. No,
Mhm.
that's just so great. And having, a really supportive family is super
Essential.
important. It's
Mhm.
so important. Even if they're kind of like, "Oh, Kandann, why aren't you doing law?" They still,
They're like, all right, we'll see whatever. We trust her. We'll see whatever it turns into. They're like, we're investing, and that's the thing. They invest in me even years later, right? Like they're constantly investing, investing, investing. And I think it's just because they know that there's something to come of this. And they really, I'm an only child. So they really do trust, like, okay, she has not messed up yet. This is going to be great.
Going off what you were talking about with, you know, finding and building and maintaining your connection with your community in order to succeed, I think that is really great advice, especially for our students too, because I mean they've grown up in these high schools that really are very close knit communities. As you
Mhm.
know, they're small schools. But they are, very well connected and very close knit, and have a great sense of community, which is just amazing, to hear about. Whenever I hear certain students' perspectives from their schools, it always warms my heart just to hear about it, because I went to a really big high school and I did not have that
Yeah,
experience.
it's 50 versus 500.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So that's just awesome to hear. And I think too that with Future Institute as well, like our programs, we want to kind of build this, community, even if we only have like, a couple hundred graduates in the programs. So anything you think and you can recommend that, we offer to better support our students kind of as they make this transition from high school to college and college to careers, anything that kind of you feel like is like, oh, this is definitely one of the biggest, keys to helping these students.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, and I think you've kind of touched on this a bit, but like the network support, I think is so invaluable, because I ended up going to college, and this is a funny story. I always love to tell it, with my arch nemesis from like middle school on, seriously. This kid and I went to like rival Horizon schools. His was in Michigan, mine was in Ohio, I think. Actually, no, I think his was in Dayton. So he was also in Ohio. But we went to these competing schools and we would only see each other during competition when it was spoken word competition time. And so he and I competed several times. And every time I beat him, I'm very proud. But we ended up going to college together. And I didn't even realize that he was considering Bowling Green, right? Like it never crossed my mind. But I think if there's a way you can track students and where they go and provide them kind of the information or some sort of connection, to one another, even if it's like just the same region, maybe not even the same city, I'm so grateful to have had him in college and how he exposed me to different things. And there was just this innate trust and relationship because we went to all these competitions together, and he went to Horizon, I went to Horizon, and we just already had this familiarity. He and I became student advocates on campus. We became activists together. We protested together. We became cohort mates in our scholarship program. He's in a fraternity, I'm in sorority. We really became great friends in college, and it just started all the way in 5th grade. So having some sort of that would be great. But also, I think I created a program when I was an undergrad, and I was working for the Office of Recruitment, that was called the Multicultural Summer Link Program. And basically it brought students on campus a week early, students of color, students who were from abroad, who have a little more need to have a little more time on campus before all the other students get there and they're overwhelmed. So it lets them kind of figure out where their classes are, where the eating spots are, where the study spots are. We did that. We got it university funded, but we have been able to now matriculate, I think it's like 350 students through our program. And so they come a week early, and they move into the dorms, and they meet their advisors, and they meet each other, right? There's a community of about 50 or 60 of them, depending on funding for the cohort, but they're able to build community a year before, or a couple weeks before, but they get accepted a year before. And so they come into campus a little bit more confident, a little bit more established, and it feels a little bit more authentic to them, and they end up staying longer. So it's a retention effort. But I created that just from recognizing the loophole in the programs that I was in and the programs that had recruited me to college. So, I mean, I think that's something to be said, is invest early and invest intentionally in these students, because they're going to honestly give you a return on that investment. But it really starts early on, like from the moment they get on that campus, and like those initial feelings of how they adjust. I mean, it shapes the rest of that experience for them. And I think that shapes the rest of how they feel about education, and the rest of how they feel about just lifelong learning. So
Definitely. Yes. I love that. I love that program that you established. I think that's amazing. I've heard of similar things at other universities as well, which I love to see that, yeah, that sense of like community, like we're all kind of in this similar boat, and let's kind of get together and have fellowship about
figure
it. And I
this
think,
thing out.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think too, like our something that we kind of have been kind of working on that effort with Future Institute of just trying to get students a little bit earlier, a little bit
Mhm.
um, more prepared for the transition as early as we can.
Yeah.
Um, and one thing that we're actually establishing this year is a little bit more, a couple little more things, activities over the summertime, just to
Yeah.
kind of have that support during the summer, where it feels like, oh man, like this is coming up quick, but also like there's a
Mhm.
lot of time, there's this weird in between kind of moment, and we're trying to establish like a connection with their mentor who they had during high school. We're trying to, um, I have a transition kind of workshop that's scheduled in a couple weeks here, that will hope it's with a mental health professional talking about mental health in college and during that transition and all of that. And so I'm really hoping that these are going to be some key,
That's helpful.
yeah, I'm hoping that that'll be kind of a key, transition effort, like just a little extra, and if we can just add a little pinch extra each year, I think, we're always trying to improve, and I really love your suggestion, and I think we'll keep kind of trying to build upon what we have. Just as a final kind of question, do you have any advice for current college students in general, or even just those specifically trying to go into politics or going into lobbying?
I think it's never too late to jump in, right? This is a large swimming pool, and it sounds really exclusive. And I think that's why I always thought I would never be a part of it, right? Like I never had a desire. It also sounds a little messy, and it's actually not that messy. It just really depends on what you're advocating for and what issue you're focused on. And it can be a kind of range of issues under one umbrella, or it can be a singular issue, kind of like mine. But I think when you're in these spaces and you're trying to figure out what it is you are willing to go to bat for, I think you have to really lay it out, right? I made a list when I was job transitioning. I made a list of all the things that I cared about. And those are the orgs that I applied for. So when I got these opportunities and these callbacks, I knew that I was willing to negotiate and actually go the distance of the application process. But I mean, I learned through the application process and the interviews that this was a lobbying position. And, instead of being like, what, this isn't what I actually thought it was going to be, and pulling back, I was like, hey, lean into this, because what can this teach you? So I think one of the biggest things is like, be flexible, jump in and whenever you feel good and ready, but also like be flexible, because you're going to be learning a lot. And I think like eventually you're just going to start having fun, kind of like I am now, where you're going to conferences and you're managing. I manage my states. You're managing your states, and you feel really at ease and very good, and you feel I think a little bit comfortable, like still kind of lean into those opportunities to grow as well. And still put yourself out there and, just make, I think, the best impact you can in any environment you're in, because sometimes also politics moves fast. You may jump from job to job to job, year after year after year, because cycles are 8 months to 12 months. And so in politics, I mean, there's just a lot more that is a little unstable. And so I think you do have to have a good support system. But if you don't have family, that can be friends, that can be coworkers, that can be mentors and professors, and it can be whatever community you find. But it really is important to kind of have that along the way, because it's a pretty tough kind of industry, but it's really rewarding. And I think once you figure out your lane, you'll flourish. So.
Well, thank you so much, Kandann. It was a pleasure having you and speaking with you and learning more about your story. And thank you to all the listeners out there. To learn more about Future Institute, visit futureinstitute.us or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at MyFutureUS.